When he slowly opened his eyes, the first thing he noticed was the strange quietness in the room. The usual hum of his air conditioner was gone, and the world outside his window seemed distant, as if it wasn't the same place he had fallen asleep in. His eyelids fluttered and he squinted, trying to focus in the dim light. There was a coldness to the air, something that felt off, and yet the silence seemed comforting in a strange way. As he shifted slightly, he realized his body was still heavy, as though he had just woken up from a deep sleep. But there was something else, something unfamiliar. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, a chill running down his spine as he became aware of two figures standing at the foot of his bed. Blinking a few more times, he finally focused. His heart skipped a beat as his mind raced to comprehend what he was seeing. Two women were standing there. No, not just women. They weren't like anyone he had ever met. The first was taller, with an air of command. She was dressed in flowing garments of deep violet and silver, and her features, while humanoid, were distinctly not human. Her skin was an odd shade of pale blue, almost glowing, and her eyes, they were unlike anything he had ever seen, bright, shining with intelligence, and piercing through him like they could see every thought in his mind. The second figure was much smaller, a child perhaps, but no less striking. She looked to be the same kind of being, but her features were softer, more innocent. Her skin the same pale blue as the woman's, but with a more subtle, delicate sheen. The girl's large eyes were wide with curiosity as she stared at him, her gaze intense but not unfriendly.
He froze for a moment, unable to speak, unable to move.
His mind spun in confusion. Why were they in his room? What did they want? How had they gotten in without him hearing a sound? Every question only made his head hurt more. His mouth was dry, and his heart pounded loudly in his chest. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the taller woman spoke.
"You're awake."
Her voice was melodic, smooth, and carried a strange kind of authority.
"Good?"
"We didn't want to startle you." He blinked again, looking between the two of them, trying to piece together the situation. But nothing made sense. He opened his mouth to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. Was this a dream? Was he still asleep? No. It felt too real. The coldness in the room, the sound of his own heartbeat in his ears, the clarity of the figures standing before him. It couldn't be a dream. The woman took a step forward, her gaze never leaving his. She was so close now he could see the fine details of her features, the intricate patterns that seemed to glow faintly beneath her skin.
"I am Princess Alara of the Ziran Empire," she said, her voice calm but commanding.
"And this is my daughter, Alira." "Princess Alara?" He blinked, trying to understand.
His mind was still processing everything. The name sounded foreign, alien even. Was this some kind of joke? He couldn't bring himself to ask, though. Something about the way she spoke made it clear she was not joking. There was a gravity to her presence, a weight that made his simple human mind struggle to comprehend her existence. Elira, the girl, stepped closer, her gaze still locked on him. There was no fear in her eyes, just curiosity. She tilted her head, examining him as though he were something new, something exciting she had never seen before. She reached out, her small hand coming dangerously close to touching him, but she hesitated. Glancing up at her mother, Princess Alara nodded, and the girl gently touched his arm. The touch was cool, almost soothing. The moment her skin met his, a strange warmth spread through his body, making him shiver with a sensation that he couldn't place. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was unsettling. The feeling was almost alien in the truest sense of the word. He finally found his voice, though it came out in a rasp. What are you doing here? How did you get in?" The princess's expression softened slightly, but there was no amusement in her eyes.
"We've been watching you," she said simply. "We've been watching Earth for quite some time now."
"You have much potential, you humans." He blinked again. Watching? Watching Earth? That didn't make any sense. Who were these people? What did they want with him? Watching Earth? He repeated, trying to make sense of the words. His mind raced with 1,000 questions, but they all seemed to get stuck somewhere between his brain and his tongue. Correct, the princess said. Your race has caught the attention of my people, the Zirin. We've been monitoring your species for decades, waiting for the right moment. That moment is now. You are the one we've chosen to help bridge the gap between our worlds. He stared at her, his heart beating faster. This couldn't be real. Chosen? He repeated. Why me? The princess glanced at her daughter, then back at him. Because, like the rest of your kind, you have the potential to be much more than you are. But first, there are certain things we need from you. Certain tests. His mind flashed to every sci-fi movie he'd ever seen. This was like something out of a book, but this wasn't fiction. This was happening to him, right now, in his own bedroom. What do you mean, tests? He asked, his voice trembling. What do you want me to do? The princess's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, he felt as though she were peering deep into his soul.
We need to know if you are worthy. Worthy of standing alongside us, of uniting our worlds.
Illyra stepped forward again, her small face full of an innocence that contrasted sharply with the gravity of the situation. She smiled slightly, as if trying to reassure him, but it only made the unease grow. There was something otherworldly about the way she looked at him, as if she knew something he didn't. We won't harm you, Zalora continued, her voice steady and calm. But there will be challenges. Tests to see how you handle pressure, how you make decisions, whether you have the strength to face what's coming. The room felt colder now, the silence heavier. He swallowed hard, his mind still struggling to keep up with what was happening. He looked between Zalora and Illyra, both watching him with intensity, as if they expected him to make a choice right then and there. For a moment, he considered refusing, telling them to leave, that none of this was real. But something in the princess's eyes, something about the calm certainty in her voice, made him hesitate. There was no denying that they weren't ordinary visitors. Whatever this was, it was bigger than he could understand. I don't know what you want from me, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But I can't just agree to whatever this is.
Zalara's gaze softened slightly, but her expression remained serious. You don't have to agree just yet.
But we have chosen you for a reason, and that reason will become clear soon enough. As the tension in the room hung heavy, the only sound was the soft hum of energy that seemed to radiate from the princess's presence. Illyra's gaze never wavered, and for the first time, the protagonist felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. His life, his world, might never be the same again. The room felt colder now, the silence heavy in the air. He could still feel their eyes on him, the princess's and her daughter's, like two laser beams cutting through his thoughts. He didn't know what to think, didn't know what to believe. One part of him wanted to scream, to ask if this was some twisted dream. But the other part, the part that was slowly starting to realize that this was real, told him to stay calm. He looked up at Princess Solara, still trying to make sense of everything. She didn't seem like the kind of person who would lie. There was an odd kind of grace about her, a power that was both calming and intimidating at the same time. And Illyra, her daughter, was different too. There was something childlike in her eyes, but it was mixed with an intelligence far beyond what any human child could possess. The princess was waiting for him to respond. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes softened just slightly, as if giving him space to process what she had just told him.
You have a choice, she said quietly. You don't have to agree to anything right now.
But know this, you are the one we have chosen, and whether you like it or not, you are involved. He rubbed his temples, his mind spinning. I don't understand. Chosen for what? For what purpose? What do you want with me? Zalara's gaze remained steady, never leaving him. The Zyran Empire is vast, and we have watched Earth for centuries. Your kind is unique, untapped potential. You are on the verge of something. An awakening, if you will. And we need your help to guide that awakening. He shook his head, unable to wrap his mind around it. I'm just me.
I'm not anyone special. There is more to you than you realize, Zalara said.
More than you can see with your eyes. Humanity has been on the edge of a great leap forward, but it has not yet found the strength to make that leap. We want to help you. We want to show you the way. But only if you are ready to understand what that means. Elira stepped forward slightly, her eyes still watching him, her little fingers playing with the hem of her mother's robe. She seemed innocent, curious, but there was something about her that made him uneasy. It was as if she knew things he didn't, as if her presence was part of something much larger than he could comprehend. You don't need to decide now, Zalara continued, but we will test you. Your mind, your strength, your heart. If you pass the tests, you will be ready to understand. Tests? He repeated, his voice rising slightly with uncertainty. What kind of tests? Zalara's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. The kind that reveal who you truly are, who you could be, if you are willing to face the unknown.
He stared at her, feeling a cold rush of fear and excitement mix inside him. His heart pounded as he tried to make sense of the situation.
But why me? Why not someone else? Because we've seen something in you, the princess replied softly. There is something inside you that we need, and if you succeed, your people will be part of something much greater than anything you have ever known. For a moment, there was only silence. Elira was looking at him. There was something strange about the way she studied him, as though she was reading every small twitch of his expression, every change in his thoughts. The silence stretched on, uncomfortable and thick. Finally, he managed to speak. I don't know if I'm ready for this, he admitted. His voice was shaky, but there was no going back now. How do I even begin to prepare for something like this? You don't need to prepare, Zalara said. The tests will come to you in ways you cannot expect. All we ask is that you keep an open mind and heart. He was about to ask another question when Elira spoke, her voice soft but clear. Will you help us? The simplicity of the question took him by surprise. He turned to look at the little girl, the alien child who seemed so innocent, yet so aware of the weight of the moment. She was the one who had been watching him most intently, her eyes never leaving his face. There was a warmth in her gaze that made him feel both seen and exposed. Help you, he repeated, his throat tight. Help us, Elira said again, this time with more urgency. Help us. Help everyone. It was like the weight of her words hit him all at once. He swallowed hard, feeling the pressure building in his chest. How could he help them? He was just a regular guy, a human. Zalara placed a hand on Elira's shoulder, and the little girl's gaze softened. There was an unspoken understanding between the two of them. The tests will show you the path, Zalara said, her tone gentle yet firm. But it is not the path you will choose. It is the path you will be shown. He wasn't sure what to say, his mind still reeling with confusion and doubt. But something inside him, the part that had always been curious, the part that longed for adventure, began to stir. This was bigger than him, bigger than anything he had ever imagined. I don't know what this means, he said quietly, but I want to know. I want to understand. Zalara nodded slightly as if she had been expecting this response. Then, the first test will begin. The air grew colder, and the soft hum he had heard earlier intensified, vibrating through the walls. He looked around, but the room was the same. His bed, the window, his desk, all unchanged. Yet, everything felt different, as though the space around him was no longer just a room in his house, but a place that existed outside of time and space. "The first test is simple," Zalara said, her voice calm but with an edge of command. "We will test your mind." Before he could react, the walls around him seemed to dissolve into a sea of stars. He blinked, and in an instant, he found himself standing in the middle of what looked like an alien city. Towers, stretching high into a dark, unfamiliar sky. The buildings were unlike anything he had ever seen, sleek and glowing with strange lights. The ground beneath his feet felt soft and warm, almost alive. It was both breathtaking and terrifying.
"What is this?" he asked, his voice trembling. His mind raced, trying to find a way to make sense of this sudden shift in reality.
"This is your first test," Zalara's voice echoed, though she wasn't anywhere in sight. "Find the way out. There is no trick here. Use your mind and trust yourself. You are not alone." He stood still for a moment, taking in his surroundings. The city before him was silent, as though waiting. He could hear the rush of wind around him, though there were no visible sources for it. His breath came in shallow gasps as he tried to steady himself. The test had begun. The moment the world around him changed, he knew he was no longer in control. 1 second, he was standing in the alien city, and the next, he was alone in a vast, empty desert. The harsh sun beat down on him, and the ground beneath his feet was dry and cracked. The air was hot, the kind of heat that made it hard to breathe. His eyes squinted as they adjusted to the brightness, but there was nothing but endless stretches of sand as far as the eye could see. He wasn't sure how he had gotten here, but he knew this was part of the test. It had to be. Everything else had been a test so far. He wasn't sure what kind of test this was, but it was clear that he needed to figure it out. He could feel the heat radiating off the ground, the weight of the sun above him pressing down, but he refused to panic. He took a deep breath and tried to steady his thoughts. The first thing he needed to do was figure out where he was and how to get out. There were no landmarks, nothing to guide him. The horizons seemed endless. He turned in a slow circle, searching for something, anything, that could help him understand what was happening. He noticed something in the distance, a faint outline against the sky. A small figure, moving steadily across the desert. It was too far to make out clearly, but it seemed to be walking purposefully, as if it knew exactly where it was going. He decided to follow it. Even though he wasn't sure what it meant, he knew he had to try something. Every instinct told him that the figure might be part of the test, some sort of challenge designed to push him further. As he walked, the heat became unbearable. Sweat drenched his shirt, and his throat was dry. He could feel the sting of the sun on his skin, but he pressed on, ignoring the discomfort. His mind was focused solely on the figure ahead. The sand beneath his feet shifted with every step, making the journey slow and exhausting, but he couldn't stop. Something deep inside him told him that this was his only chance. The figure moved in a steady rhythm, never slowing down or speeding up. It was almost as if it was waiting for him to catch up. Every step he took seemed to bring him closer, but it also felt as though the figure was just as far away as it had been when he first saw it. Minutes stretched into hours. His legs burned and his body ached with exhaustion, but still the figure remained just out of reach. His mind began to wander, doubts creeping in.
Was this a test of endurance, of patience?
Or was there something deeper, something more hidden in the desert that he hadn't yet understood? He pushed the thoughts aside and kept walking. He had no choice. The figure was his only lead. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he reached the figure. As he drew closer, he realized it wasn't a person at all, but a structure. It was a small, crumbling building made of dark stone, standing alone in the middle of the desert. It was ancient, the stone weathered by years of exposure to the harsh winds and sun. There was no sign of life around it, but the building was still standing, an odd, out-of-place monument in the middle of nowhere. He approached cautiously, unsure of what to expect. The door to the building was slightly ajar, and he pushed it open slowly, stepping inside. The air was cooler here, a welcome relief from the scorching desert heat. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light inside, he saw that the room was empty, save for a single pedestal in the center. On the pedestal was an old, worn book, its pages yellowed with age. The book looked out of place in this desolate place, as though it had been waiting for someone to find it. He stepped closer to it, his hands trembling slightly as he reached out and opened it. The pages were filled with strange symbols, not like anything he had ever seen. The writing seemed to shift as he moved his eyes across the page, as though the book was alive. He tried to read it, but the words made no sense, like a language that his mind couldn't quite grasp. His frustration grew as he stared at the book, trying to make sense of its contents. He had been given a test, but now it felt like the test had become a riddle. What was he supposed to do with this? Was this part of the challenge? To decipher something he couldn't understand? A voice suddenly filled his mind, cutting through the silence. It was Zalara's voice, calm and clear.
"You're not meant to understand everything right away," she said. "This test is not about knowledge.
It is about trust." But he stared at the book, his fingers still tracing the strange symbols. Trust? He repeated aloud, the words sounding foreign in the context of what was happening. Trust in what? In yourself, Zalara's voice answered. In your ability to move forward without all the answers. You will not find the truth by searching for it in the way you think. Sometimes, the path to the truth requires you to let go of your need to control everything. Let go of your doubts. Trust in the process. His heart skipped a beat. He looked around the room, his mind racing. Was the test really about trust? Trust in himself? The idea seemed so simple, yet it felt like the hardest thing to do. He had spent his entire life trying to control everything, trying to make sense of every situation. Letting go of that control felt impossible. But here, in the midst of this alien world, he realized that he didn't have much of a choice. He closed the book and stepped back from the pedestal. For the first time, he allowed himself to breathe. He had been so focused on finding answers, on solving the puzzle, that he had forgotten the most important part of all. Sometimes, you have to trust that the answers will come when the time is right. Zalara's voice echoed again, this time softer.
You are ready.
"You have learned the first lesson." He didn't know what to say.
He felt both relieved and unsettled. The desert, the book, the figure, it was all part of the test, a way to make him see beyond his own limitations. It had never been about finding the right answer. It had been about learning to trust himself. As he turned to leave the building, the desert stretched out before him once again. But this time, the path ahead seemed clearer. He didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but for the first time since this journey began, he felt ready to face them. And then, as if it had all been a dream, the world around him began to shift again. The desert faded, the crumbling stone building disappearing into nothingness. He felt a pull, like gravity was shifting, and suddenly, he was back in the room he had started in. His legs were still sore from the long walk, but the desert, the building, the test, it was all gone. Zalara and Elira were waiting for him, their expressions unreadable but expectant. He met their gaze and realized something. The test wasn't over. It had only just begun. The room was still, almost unnervingly quiet. His heart pounded in his chest as he stood there, staring at Zalara and Elira, the weight of the tests still fresh in his mind. The desert, the mysterious book, the lessons he had learned. All of it felt surreal. But here he was, back in the room where it all began. The space around him, so familiar, suddenly felt foreign, like it was part of something much bigger than he could grasp. Zalara's gaze was calm but intense. Her eyes, filled with the wisdom of 1,000 lifetimes, never wavered as they met his. Elira, standing just behind her mother, was quiet, watching him with an expression that seemed both curious and knowing.
There was something in the child's gaze that unsettled him, but also made him feel understood in a way that no one else had before.
"You've done well." Zalara's voice was soft, but her words carried a weight. "But the final test is yet to come." But the final test is yet to come. He swallowed hard, a knot forming in his stomach.
Another test?
His mind raced. He thought he had understood the purpose of the tests, but now he wasn't so sure. What more could they ask of him? That bathed the room in an intimate glow. He had already faced the unknown in the desert, trusted in the process, and let go of his doubts. Was there more he needed to understand?
More he needed to do. "What is the final test?" he asked, his voice shaky but determined.
He didn't want to show fear, but it was hard to ignore the anxious flutter in his chest. "The final test," Clara said, her eyes never leaving his, "is not one that can be measured by strength, intelligence, or endurance. It is a test of heart, a test of your willingness to sacrifice." Sacrifice? He repeated the word, his mind struggling to understand its meaning in this context. "What do you mean?"
Salara's expression softened just slightly.
"You've been chosen not just because of your potential, but because of your heart. The path that lies ahead will require more than just intelligence or strength. It will require you to give up something of yourself, to make a choice that will affect not just you, but the future of your people. Your decision will have consequences. You will have to trust that what you choose is right, even when it seems impossible." He felt a chill run down his spine. Sacrifice. The word echoed in his mind, but it didn't make sense. How could anyone be asked to give up something important without knowing what it was? How could he make a choice without knowing the consequences? "Do I have a choice?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Or is this something I must do?" "You always have a choice," Solara replied. "But understand this. Every choice carries its own burden. The choice you make now will shape not just your future, but the future of your people. There is no going back once you've made it."
He felt the weight of her words sink in. Every choice had consequences.
The burden of making a decision that could change everything was heavy, and yet he knew he couldn't turn away from it. Whatever this was, it was bigger than anything he had ever faced. It was bigger than just himself. It was about the future of humanity, the future of his world. The room around him seemed to grow darker, the air thick with the gravity of the moment. He couldn't see it, but he felt a presence, something ancient and powerful. He had no idea what was about to happen, but he knew that the decision he made now would shape everything that came next. Zalara stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his. "You are at the crossroads, human. The choice is yours. Will you accept the responsibility that comes with the power you've been given? Or will you turn away from it and let others decide your fate for you?" He thought about her words, the weight of them pressing down on him. He thought about everything he had learned so far. The tests, the desert, the book, the strange feeling of being chosen. He had never asked for any of this. He had never wanted to be in the position he was in now. But now, there was no escaping it. I don't know what to do," he admitted, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "How can I know what's right?"
How can I know if I'm ready? You won't know until you decide, Zalara said. But that is the nature of all great decisions.
They come without guarantees. The future is never certain, but it is yours to shape. He took a deep breath, his mind racing. His thoughts were a blur of uncertainty, doubt, and fear. But amid the chaos, there was something else, a glimmer of hope, a flicker of understanding. He had been given a choice, an opportunity to shape something greater than himself. And even though it was terrifying, It was also liberating. I have to make the decision myself, he said, more to himself than to anyone else. I can't rely on anyone else to tell me what's right.
Exactly. That is the first step toward true strength.
He looked at Elira, standing silently beside her mother. The girl's eyes were filled with an understanding far beyond her years. There was no fear in her gaze, only the quiet confidence that came with knowing her place in the universe. Elira, he said, his voice soft, what do you think? What should I do? The child's gaze met his, and for a moment there was a stillness, as if time itself had paused. Irira stepped forward, her small hand reaching out to gently touch his arm. The warmth of her touch was surprising, soothing even. Her eyes locked onto his, and in that moment, he felt a deep connection, a connection that transcended language, species, and time. You already know the answer, she said quietly. Her voice was soft, yet there was a wisdom in her words that made him pause. You just have to believe in yourself. Her words struck him like a lightning bolt. The realization hit him with the force of a revelation. He had been searching for something outside of himself, trying to understand what others wanted him to do, what the tests required of him. But the answer wasn't out there. It was within him. He already knew what he had to do. He just had to trust in himself, in his own heart. He looked at Solara, then at Elira, and finally back at the empty space around him. The weight of the decision was still heavy, but now he felt a sense of clarity. He had been given this opportunity for a reason. He wasn't here by accident, and he wasn't alone. I'm ready, he said, his voice steady now, filled with determination. Zalara's eyes softened, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips.
Then it is time. The future is yours to shape.
As she spoke those words, the room around him seemed to shift again, and for a moment, he felt himself being pulled in every direction at once.
But this time, instead of feeling lost, he felt at peace. The test was over. The choice had been made, and whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. He was ready to face it.